Right. So everybody that's listening to us, if you're listening to us on the radio, we appreciate that. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, we also appreciate that. Also, we have a very special guest, Liz Pizzarello, and I got it right. Thank God for that. We will move forward with that. And she is the author of Eclipsed, My Journey into Blindness and Miraculous Surgery that restored my sight decades later. I'm sorry if I fumbled and stumbled a little bit over that book, but we do hope that people get the book. Again, it's My Journey into Blindness and the Miraculous Surgery that restored my sight decades later. Liz, thanks so much for coming on. This is going to be an incredible story that people are going to hear today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk to you.
All right, so Liz, let's talk a little bit about you and just growing up. And then obviously this started before age 38. I'm assuming you can go a little bit into better detail. Obviously, you know your own story better than I do about that.
I was born a sighted person. I had no problems, as a kid. Read, loved reading Nancy Drew. That was my thing, my big hobby. My father was a scientist, so I always felt like your eyes with your lenses, you could see everything. Felt like I was on to something big in my world. So my sight was everything to me. I protected it. When you're a little kid and your mom would say, oh, don't run with a stick in your hand or throw rocks, you could blind somebody. I followed the rules. I was a rule follower. So, but I had a problem when I had entered college. I was studying for 2 degrees in business and biology. And I went to a party and there was a desk that had a whole bunch of drinks on it. Never saw the desk or the drinks, wiped it out. So I went and I figured that maybe I was having an eye strain. I need to go see a doctor. So I went to my family doctor. He said he'd seen a little something and sent me to a big eye institute in Philadelphia.
And how old were you at this point? Just to interject.
I am getting ready to graduate college. I'm 21. I'm getting ready. Wow. I am 2 weeks before graduation with degrees. So yeah. I'm just like, I got the golden ring on that carousel and I'm ready to go. Let's just go and get going here. And I went to the hospital, Wills Eye in Philadelphia, and looked at the doctor, did tests, and he said to me, Elizabeth, did you notice you're losing some sight? I said, well, I just think I'm here. I just need some eye drops, studying a lot, 2 degrees. And he said, oh, you have to run some tests. He did. And he said, I see something else. Go back. I go, okay, where's my drops? And he said, Elizabeth, I have something to tell you. Did you know you're going blind? That you're losing vision? I said, going blind? Like, no. Like, what do you mean? When is this going to happen? I'm getting ready to graduate in 2 weeks. You tell me I'm going blind? He said, if things occur based on what our tests are telling us, you'll be blind by 40. I said, 40? Are you kidding me? Well, he wasn't much off. I didn't go blind at 40. I went blind at 38.
Yeah.
And I have to say, never expected it. But I will say to people, and if you ever have a catastrophic loss, whatever it is, when I had that collision of shaking my confidence and saying, what am I going to do? Seeing no hope in the future of having this great life, okay? That was the worst day. All it did for me was cause me to do this spinning. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And for 5 years, I was sad, I was mad, and I took jobs, half-heartedly, because I said, oh, well, the only thing that's going to be guaranteed in my life is that I'm going to be blind.
Yeah.
And I will say to you, setting the pace that way really did not help me get to a better place. The thing that changed the whole dynamics of my situation was that I had to get real with myself. I couldn't hope that this wasn't going to happen. I couldn't say, well, oh yes, optimistically, oh yes, everybody's going to want to hire me. I was thinking, who's going to hire a blind scientist? Who's going to hire a blind accountant? Answer, nobody. And this happened before the American Disabilities Act. This happened 7 years before the American Disabilities Act. The American Disabilities Act came into existence in 1990. This was in 83 when they were telling me that I was going to go blind, and you had no rights. So what I did when I was a young person is go to the job. I was a comptroller for a major hotel, do my work in the office, run home at night. My father was a scientist, and he let me use one of his big magnifiers, read the documents I presented, the financials, redo them, and then bring them to the office as if, I had a great night life, just hanging out. Because you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell anybody this was going on. The blindness occurred over time, and as my sight was being stripped away, it ended up, at the end of it, I ended up living in the dark for over a decade, for 12 years. But the saving grace to my story is, when we talk about, is there help out there? For me, there was no help until I passed the threshold of legally blind. Legally blind to get help with the government was that you either had to have only 20% of your sight in your dominant eye, or vision of over 2200. And I was the 2200, less than 20%. If you can imagine, normal sight is 20/20. Imagine having vision 2200, and that was my best eye. So I did go totally blind, and I learned to adjust. Acceptance was a big deal. And when I got to the point where I lived with my blindness, accepted it, worked with it, the dynamics of my story started to change in a big way. The biggest words, or I would say the biggest effect on me, was when I finally had to stop running away from myself and denying, oh no, I'm not going blind. I have a little sight loss problem. I was going blind. That's a big little sight loss problem. And when I got real and finally said to myself, and I had to hear myself say it, Beth, you are going blind. I had to hear myself. And when I really started hearing the real deal, I started getting into a mindset where, I started doing little things that changed, like little victories. My biggest little victory at one time was making my first cup of coffee. Well, doesn't sound like much, but if you can't see things, you learn how to be organized and all that. But when I did that, I said, you know what? If I can do a coffee, I can do something a little bit bigger than that, good grief. But the problem with me was there were other blind people, and we hear about them, that when they go blind, they embrace it. They're like, bring it on. I'm ready for the challenge. No, I was the other side of the population. I crumbled like a piece of paper. I wasn't gonna, and even when I went blind, I wasn't the person. Our big hallmark person was that there was a gentleman who skied the Alps, and he was blind, totally blind. Well, he was the big story of the day at the lighthouse. Well, I thought to myself, blind, I'm never going to ski anywhere. And when I got my sight back, my funny thought was, well, gee, I have sight back. I have no plan to go out and do like jumping out of an airplane to go skydiving. How I got sight. That wasn't my gig. But I've learned that you don't have to be the strongest character. You don't, to be able to survive and thrive through it, because in your own timing, accepting and making changes, that works for you. There's no one size fits all. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm not brave enough. I am not brave enough. Well, you know what? I wasn't. But you kind of have to, at points in your life, dig down really deep, because there's a lot of special characteristics a lot of special talents, especially when you're older. You weren't, you're not a newborn. You have a lot of things that you love and you can change. But pivoting in life is a big thing when catastrophic, like me, making a change with this change. I used to say at one time, I am never going to be happy unless I can see. Well, never is a long time. And placing my happiness on my eyes, what was that about? So I had to come to a point where I had to accept that I could have a good life. It was definitely never going to be the same as the life with sight. But you know what? I could thrive, rather not just survive, but thrive through it all when I got a different attitude about the whole situation. And accepting the change, working with the change. People say, oh, was it easy? No, absolutely not. The other thing, a misconception is people say, well, I heard that when you go blind, your hearing kicks in, another sense kicks in. Well, true and false. Your other sense, for example, your hearing, will kick in only when you emotionally let go of thinking that, like for me, my sight was my primary sense. When I let go of relying on my vision and saying, okay, vision gone, we got to use hearing. For me, hearing, you have to change your whole mindset. Because what I'll tell you, one of the most frightening days of my life was when I learned to cross the street. Now you say cross the street, that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, a kid can cross the street. Well, blindfold yourself and stand on a corner in New York. Let's go and cross the street together. I would say one of us, is going to make it across, and one of us is going to be road pizza. That's a fact. That's a fact. Yeah. But you don't pick up on the hearing until you really accept it as your primary sense. And learning to cross the street, we stood on the corner for hours listening to traffic patterns, people who were crossing streets, figuring, when to cross safely without seeing anything. That is frightening. So, in my world, you have to, in order to even survive and make it to a life that's so much better than survival, but thriving, you have to get yourself acclimated and understand it's not going to be instant and it's not going to be easy. And when you accept that, here I am. And through it all, through the blindness, I met Elizabeth. I was teaching. My students did not know I was blind because I did not use the cane. Set up the classroom because I had a little bit of sight at that time. Set up the classroom by counting. I knew the exact number of steps in that classroom. I couldn't see my students. So what did I do to have them, when they would ask you have to contribute and to the class to get credit? I couldn't see my students. So I told them I ran my class like a game show. And at one point I'd say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, who wants 2 extra credit points? What I want you to do is, you think you have an answer, raise your hand, I'll point, stand up, say your name proudly, and tell me your answer. That was the only way I could track what which students were participating.
So no one else knew?
No.
Wow.
School knew, but not the students. Because, my students were students that had challenges in their life. Many of them were not interested in going to school, primarily because they were not going to be able to be accepted.
This was a high school?
High school to college.
Okay.
And I taught at Kaiser when that would be like the freshman year of college. Well, I knew when I was a student, if I knew I had a blind teacher, oh boy, that was like gold. So I felt that they were not going to, the foxes, they're going to outfox the foxes. So I ran my class that way. The other thing was, if I sensed that you were cheating, I told my students that if I sense that you were having, anxiety, I will just point in the air. I will tell you to move to another chair, just so that, breathing oxygen helps you to do well on tests. And if you panic, you don't do well. So when I sense you're panicking, I'm going to point and ask you to move. Well, it helped them because some of them were panicking, but it also helped me if I sensed that somebody might be cheating. I was just going to move you because you needed oxygen. So no, they never knew I was blind. And I always brought their tests home. So I didn't do any marking, and I always made them write papers. And I had somebody, a high school student I hired, read them. I said, read me these papers. And that's how I did it. But it was magnifiers,
How many years did you do this for, though, Liz?
Teaching?
Yeah, with the kids, not knowing.
3.
3. Okay. Wow. Okay.
I decided to do something else. I decided to start a nonprofit and try to help kids. And I had a horse race at that time. My husband and I had owned a home that had horses there. So at that time, I decided that what I would do is I would invite kids who could not read. And what I told them was we had miniature horses too. And I told them that the horses really enjoyed hearing stories, but they couldn't read. And our miniatures were very calm, okay?
Right.
Like big dogs. So I would tell them, can you please read these horses some favorite stories of yours and share with them? And if you have a problem reading, spell the word out to me and I'll tell you what it is and I'll help you. And we can do this. So for a couple of years there, I ran a ranch helping kids to read because, at that time I was going blind, so I couldn't read. So I thought I could help them. And the horses were the trick. And that ended when a hurricane came and destroyed our home. And then the barn was gone. And that was a big deal for us.
Well, and this was in where?
Right there in Coconut Creek.
Oh, Coconut
right
Creek.
near Coconut.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was many years ago, yeah. So, and the hurricane did destroy things. And during that hurricane, actually, my husband was on a business trip, and I was in a closet with a dog, blind, feeling the walls shaking from the wind and everything.
Wow.
And then the police came to the house when the crisis was over, and they came to my house and said, I heard people talking, so I thought, well, I'm going to go outside and see what's going on. And the police said, stop, don't move. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get arrested because we got a curfew, because we got a hurricane. And I stood there with my hands up and I said, okay. And I thought, I'm going to get arrested. And he said, we're the police. You have an electrical line down and we don't want you to get electrocuted. So we're going to carry you over the line, safe to safety. And I said, well, what about my dog? And they carried my dog too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's how I went to a neighbor's house until my husband finally came back. And then we had to go to a hotel or whatever to figure out what we were going to do.
What kind of hope would you give people that are listening to us tonight, whether they're listening on a radio, whether they're listening to us on the podcasting sites? Because there are a lot of people struggling, whether it is medical, whether it's financial, the list goes on and on. These people are all around us, and some people have lost hope, and we want to try to lift up a story like yours to them and show them that a person like you was very accomplished in life before this issue, had this issue, got a little down in the dumps, and you're even getting back to how accomplished you were in the past and bringing it to the present.
Thank you. It's a hard road. It really is. But you just you have to just, for me, how I got myself picked up was that I realized the world kept going on and on. And for me to just sit there and say, oh, I'm so, I'm depressed. I sat in a chair for 5 years saying, no, I'm not going to accept this. But you know what? The world kept going. And there reached a point where I had to figure out that there were ways there are ways that you can get ahead. But I figured out one thing really important from that 5 years is that 0 plus 0 is 0. Doing nothing, hoping for no change, or hoping for a change and doing nothing and not changing your mind to have that occur, is the same thing, 0. Right. And I was kind of losing it, that, I was kind of losing it on that level. The other thing is, this is one of the most exciting things in this world today. Technology and medical advancements due to the computer age, and all of these high-tech things that we can do now should give everyone hope. Because my surgery, they said, well, maybe in 25 years, we might be able to help somebody like you. Well, I'm in my 20s saying 25 years, are you kidding me? But you know what? 25 years went fast. And right now, the way science is, things are happening so quickly that this is the best time in your life to ever have hope. Because no matter what's ailing you right now, whether it's your physical or something you cannot do, a lot of creations and inventions are occurring now because of technology. So I say to people, 25 years ago, didn't have a lot of hope. This day and age, if my implant is not guaranteed, they don't know what's happening with it, and I have a lot of problems with it. We're almost hoping that it's not reaching the end of its life, because, I have less time to be able to see now than I did originally. It just has a little bit of problems, malfunctions, where I can't really see very well. But I know one thing from this whole adventure, and that is, if I was to go blind again, I know I can do this, and I can manage within me, I can manage these big catastrophic or whatever is happening to me. And I think that's the same thing with your audience, with anybody. I discounted my strength within myself because there were a lot of things within me that I had never tapped. I mean, that takes a lot of strength within you to try to, deal with blindness, to deal with mental health issues, to deal with a lot of things. And you know what? I think sometimes we don't realize just how much stuff we have in here in our little miniature computer body kind of thing. And I think that that's the thing where I was losing it. Because when I was losing my sight, I almost put it into an all or nothing. Like I say, I'll never be happy unless I have vision. Because I only narrowed my vision based on if I had sight. And that's the same thing for anybody else that's dealing with bad things. Because I've realized that bad things do happen to really good people. But you know what? Really good things happen to good people too. And don't discount yourself. I almost would be at a point where I was so sad, I would feel like I had a target on my back. Why me? I just feels like lightning is striking me every time. And you know what? I had to realize there is no target on my back. The only thing I have, and I asked my mother this many years ago when I was going blind, I said, I always try to do the right things. I try to be a good person. Why me? Why am I the one out of this group of people in the world that is going blind? And she said to me, why not? Because you have one thing in common with every other person, and that is that you're a human being, and everybody's body is different, and everybody reacts to things differently, and you have to understand that. And I think I wasn't understanding that. I think sometimes we look at ourselves and say, if this doesn't happen the way it happened with other people, it's got to be me. Or people saying, well, it's you, because that's not what I experienced. And my thing is, I've learned from blindness and in anybody else in life, there is no one size fits all. So don't ever let somebody tell you, well, I don't get it. Because, I went through this and I never had a problem. Well, good for you, because that's your experience. And I think that's what gave me a change in thought. And that was, I could not, when I was going blind, allow people's interpretation of blindness and their thoughts about how I should be responding to what was going on. I remember people would say, oh, you have so much things to be happy for. Well, don't think on that. Think about this and that. Well, I wasn't there. And what I've learned, and I'm telling people, don't discount your feelings about what's going on with you. And you have the right to even have empathy for yourself and say, damn, this is a really bad deal I was handled. I never expected this. But you have the right to feel that way. And I think that in this world, what was really preventing me from progressing was that a lot of times people, especially with anybody else who has this, telling me that my feelings toward what was happening to me, discounting them. Oh no, look at all the good things in your life. Well, this is true, but all those good things weren't superseding the blindness at this moment. Or if you're having a problem with medication or illness or mental illness or even depression, you can't tell somebody, oh, you'll be happy if I bring you a cupcake when you're pressed out on the floor. And that's what I'm telling people in this day and age. Don't let anyone, whatever is ailing you, you can only find strength when you don't diminish your own. And diminishing your own is by people saying, oh, discounting, or, oh, this isn't anything big. Well, you know what? Live it. It is. And that's what I'm telling people. So that's my story about, bad things do happen to good people. But okay, good things happen too. Progress forward. Do it at your own pace. Do small steps to get there. But never let anybody, and this is the biggest problem, people telling you that you don't have the right or you didn't have that. They didn't have that. Well, they probably did. And that is one of the best things I can tell anybody. Life is not a one size fits all. Every blind person there at Lighthouse, when I went to Lighthouse for the Blind, there are 100 different ways you can be blind. I mean, it's not just that you're totally black. There are people who are blind in 1/4 of their eye, people who can only see out the periphery, and the center is blind. So there is not a one size fits all. So I'm telling your audience, whatever is what's going on with you or what's affecting you, don't ever diminish what you're feeling, and deal with it and put it in perspective as best you can and build on your small victories to get the larger ones. So that's my story.
Yeah. People need to hear this from someone that's been in the struggle, fought back, and has really accomplished a lot in their life. Because a lot of people, they emphasize with themselves, as you said, they say, poor me, poor me, poor me. But there is a time that say, yeah, poor you. You get that out of your system. Sucks.
Right.
But then you got to move forward and try to say, what can I do with whatever issue I have, and try to push forward in life. And that's what you got to do. And that's important.
That's why I wrote the book Eclipsed. Yeah. Because I wanted to let people know you don't have to be the strongest person. You don't have to be any of that. But you know what? Getting your life back is in your own hands. So it is in your own timetable. So you don't have to make what people expect to, their expectation of where you should be where you think you should be. And when I was able to deal with it and go through it, like I said, I knew other blind people that were like, bring it on. I wasn't that, but admitting to myself, I'm not that. But you know what? At the end of the day, I got to the same place they did. They got their life. I got my life. They were brave. I wasn't. Maybe a bit quicker, a little slower. But at the end of the day, we both got at the same place. So what is bad about that, people? What is really bad about that?
Right. I want to, like I said, I want to have you on again because I think it's important. But I want to end the interview with this. If you could just tell people where they could find your book and also any other kind of website or social media presence you have, just so people can follow you.
My book is on Amazon. It's Eclipsed. It's the name of the book by Elizabeth Pizzarello. And I am on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere out there. I also have a website, BethPizzarello.com. And if you say, oh, Beth, is that Elizabeth? You can do it both ways because you're both going to, whether it's Beth or Elizabeth, you'll still get there, Pizzarello.com. So I encourage anybody to come on over to my website and check it out. And I would certainly welcome you inviting me back because my mission is to help people, especially people going through these difficult times. And this world is very difficult right now. And I'm just trying to give a different way for people to look at their situation.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think it's important to have you back on because again, you're helping people by coming on the program and having them listen to you really tell a story about perseverance and hope in general. So, Elizabeth Pizzarello, thanks so much for coming on. I do hope people get the book. We're going to put all that in the description box and obviously use that as the title too. So, people should definitely go and get that book on Amazon.
Thank you so much, Rob, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with your audience.